She didn't want luxury, fame, or anything big. She just wanted one thing, a chance to save her mom. But asking her rich sister for help was like begging a wall for mercy. The humiliation cuts so deep, she almost doesn't notice him, until strong arms catch her and a cold voice says, "Do you always walk without looking?" The owner of the company, the CEO. And he has no idea that in that second, he just brushed against his own fate. The corridor on the top floor of Pritchard Industries seemed endless. Each step on the luxurious carpet made Juniper Halstead painfully aware of how out of place she was. Her simple intern uniform felt like a beacon announcing her inadequacy in this world of crystal chandeliers and polished marble. But none of that mattered now. She needed to speak with her sister. Their mother was ill, the surgery could not wait, and every single call had been ignored. Juniper's heart pounded against her ribs as she approached the presidential floor reception. The familiar scent of expensive perfume reached her before she saw her. Charlotte, her older sister, seated behind an elegant desk like a queen on her throne. Charlotte's tailored designer suit probably cost more than 3 months of Juniper's salary. When their eyes met, the warmth Juniper desperately hoped for was nowhere to be found. "What are you doing here?" Charlotte's voice cut through the air like sharpened glass. "Mum needs surgery. I've tried calling you dozens of times, but you never answer." Juniper kept her voice steady, despite the trembling in her hands. "Please, I need your help." Charlotte's perfectly manicured fingers stopped typing. She leaned back in her leather chair and regarded her younger sister with undisguised contempt. "And what exactly does that have to do with me?" "She's our mother, Charlotte. She's your problem." Charlotte's eyes narrowed. "I work hard for my money. If you and she had put in more effort instead of accepting mediocrity, you wouldn't be in this pathetic situation." The words struck like physical blows. Juniper felt her chest tighten, memories of their childhood flashing through her mind, when they had been close, when Charlotte had braided her hair and told her stories before bed. That Charlotte was long gone. "I'm not asking for myself," Juniper whispered. "The doctors said without the surgery, I already have my own plans for my savings." Charlotte waved dismissively. "A holiday in Monaco, actually. I won't waste my money on this. Now leave before someone important sees you here." The pain cut deep, deeper than Juniper had anticipated. Her eyes burned with unshed tears, but she refused to give Charlotte the satisfaction of seeing her cry. With whatever dignity she could muster, she turned to leave that suffocating place. If this story is touching your heart, show your support. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Every action helps us keep bringing you new stories full of emotion. She didn't see him coming. The impact against a firm, muscular chest sent her stumbling backward. Strong hands gripped her arms, preventing what would have been an embarrassing fall. A sophisticated woody cologne invaded her senses. Sandalwood and something darker, more mysterious. Juniper looked up and froze. Graham Pritchard, the CEO himself, the most feared and admired man in the entire company, stood before her, his amber eyes burning like molten gold as he frowned down at her. He was impossibly tall. She barely reached his shoulder, with broad shoulders that strained against his impeccably tailored charcoal suit. His dark hair was swept back from a face that could have been carved from granite, all sharp angles, and a squared jaw that spoke of determination and power. He released her with an abrupt movement, as if touching her had been distasteful. "Do you always walk without watching where you're going?" His voice was deep, edged with irritation. "I'm terribly sorry, sir. I was distracted." Juniper lowered her gaze, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Graham studied her for several seconds longer than necessary. Unlike the women in his social circle, she wore no heavy makeup or designer clothing. There was something delicate about her. Long hair cascading freely over her shoulders, expressive eyes glistening with traces of tears, a natural beauty unmarred by artifice. Something about her captured his attention, though he immediately pushed the thought aside. He had no time for distractions. "Who are you?" Before Juniper could respond, Charlotte's sharp voice intervened. "No one important, Mr. Pritchard. Just an intern." She was already leaving. Graham raised an eyebrow, catching the coldness in his secretary's tone. He looked back at the young woman, noting how her shoulders had stiffened at Charlotte's words, how she held her chin up despite the obvious pain in her eyes. "Be more careful next time," he said finally, then continued toward his office. But something bothered him. He paused at his door and glanced back, watching the young intern walk toward the elevator with quiet dignity, while Charlotte returned to her work with a satisfied smirk. That exchange between the two women had not seemed ordinary. Graham entered his office and stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking London's grey skyline. Rain had begun to fall, streaking the glass like tears. He had built this empire with his own hands, turning his father's company into a global powerhouse. He had everything: wealth, power, respect, everything except peace. His phone buzzed. A message from his father. Board meeting tomorrow, 9 sharp, non-negotiable. Graham's jaw tightened. He knew what that meeting would bring. More pressure, more demands, more attempts to control the one aspect of his life he refused to surrender. But as he loosened his silk tie and poured himself a whiskey, his thoughts kept drifting back to those tearful eyes, to the way she had looked at him, not with the calculating interest he was accustomed to from women, but with something genuine. He shook his head and drained his glass. Distractions were dangerous, and Graham Pritchard had learned long ago that caring about anyone only led to betrayal. The boardroom felt like a battlefield. Graham sat at the head of the long mahogany table, his amber eyes scanning the faces of the directors assembled before him. His father, Edward Pritchard, occupied the opposite end, still commanding despite his silver hair and the walking cane resting against his chair. The founder of Pritchard Industries had built this company from nothing, and even in semi-retirement, his word carried immense weight. "Your reputation is damaging the company's image." Edward's voice was calm but firm. "The investors are growing restless with all these tabloid scandals." Graham's jaw tightened. "My work speaks for itself. My personal life shouldn't matter." "But it does." Edward leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped on the table. "A married CEO, a stable one, inspires confidence. The board has discussed this at length." He gestured to the men and women around the table, all avoiding Graham's piercing gaze. "We require an immediate solution. A marriage would be ideal." Graham stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the polished floor. "This is absurd." "It's necessary." Edward's tone brooked no argument. "You have 3 months to resolve this situation, or you will face consequences. The board has made its position clear." The silence that followed was suffocating. Graham looked around the room, at the directors who couldn't meet his eyes, at his father's unwavering stare. They had him cornered, and they knew it. "This meeting is adjourned," Graham said coldly, striding toward the door. Marriage. The very word made his stomach turn. Trust was not something he gave easily, not anymore, not after Victoria. His former fiancée had taught him that love was merely a weapon people used to destroy you. She had smiled at him every morning while secretly plotting with his former business partner to steal company secrets. The betrayal had nearly cost him everything. He walked through the corridors of his building, his footsteps echoing on marble. Employees scattered from his path like startled birds. He didn't notice. His mind was a storm of rage and calculation. Then he saw her. The young intern from the day before sat alone in the break room, a simple sandwich before her that she had barely touched. She was reading a worn paperback, completely absorbed in its pages, her long hair falling like a curtain around her face. Even from this distance, he could see the dark circles under her eyes. Graham paused, watching her through the glass partition. Something about her intrigued him. The quiet dignity with which she carried herself, the way she seemed utterly unaware of the world around her when she read. He made a decision. Later that afternoon, Marcus Webb, Graham's best friend since university and the company's chief legal counsel, entered his office with a folder in hand. "You asked me to look into someone?" Marcus dropped into the leather chair across from Graham's desk, his sharp blue eyes curious. Juniper Halstead, 25 years old, started as an intern in the marketing department 3 months ago. Excellent performance reviews, hard-working, punctual, well-liked by her colleagues. Graham stared out the window, his back to his friend. "What else?" "She comes from a modest background. Her mother is seriously ill, needs surgery that the family can't afford. She has a younger sister about 10 years old, lives with them in a small house in Whitechapel." Marcus paused, flipping through pages. "And interestingly enough, her older sister is Charlotte Halstead, your executive secretary." Graham turned slowly. "Charlotte?" "The very same. Though from what I've gathered, There's no love lost between them. Charlotte apparently distanced herself from the family years ago. Hasn't helped them financially despite her considerable salary. The pieces began falling into place. That cold exchange he had witnessed in the corridor, the contempt in Charlotte's voice, the tears in Juniper's eyes. She's different, Graham murmured, more to himself than to Marcus. Different how? She works without complaining, treats everyone with genuine kindness, never asks for favors. Graham's eyes grew distant. She's nothing like the women I've known. Marcus straightened in his chair, alarm flickering across his features. Graham, what exactly are you thinking? Before Graham could respond, his phone rang. The annual charity gala was in 3 hours, and he was expected to attend. The event was everything Graham despised: champagne flowing like water, artificial smiles, business deals disguised as philanthropy. He stood near the bar, nursing a whiskey and counting the minutes until he could leave without causing offense. Then Victoria appeared. His ex-fiancée swept through the crowd in a crimson gown, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed, her red lips curved in a predatory smile. Before Graham could retreat, she had attached herself to his arm, leaning into him with practiced intimacy. Darling, it's been too long, she purred, loud enough for the nearby journalists to hear. Camera flashes exploded around them. Graham tried to disengage, but Victoria clung tighter, her nails digging into his sleeve. Let go, he said through gritted teeth. But we have so much to discuss, don't we? Her voice was honey laced with poison. I've missed you terribly. The reporters pressed closer, shouting questions, cameras clicking relentlessly. Graham felt the familiar fury rising in his chest, at Victoria, at the vultures surrounding them, at his own inability to escape this circus. Then through the chaos he caught a glimpse of her. Juniper stood at the edge of the crowd, wearing a simple ivory dress that somehow made her look more elegant than any woman in designer gowns. She was observing the commotion with a serene expression, and when their eyes met, something passed between them, understanding perhaps, or compassion. Then she simply turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. In that moment, standing in the midst of flashing cameras and Victoria's suffocating perfume, Graham made his decision. He knew exactly what he had to do. The days following the gala passed in a blur of observation. Graham found himself watching Juniper Halstead with an attention that bordered on obsessive. He noticed the way she arrived early every morning, always with a thermos of homemade tea. He observed how she thanked the cleaning staff by name, how she helped struggling colleagues without expecting recognition, how she ate her modest lunches alone while losing herself in books. She was an anomaly in his world of calculated ambitions and hidden agendas. From his office window, he watched her cross the courtyard below, her long hair dancing in the autumn wind. She stopped to help an elderly security guard carry boxes, laughing at something he said. The sound didn't reach Graham's ears, but he imagined it, warm and genuine, like everything else about her. You're staring again. Graham turned to find Marcus leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, eyebrows raised in amusement. I'm thinking. You've been thinking for 5 days straight. Marcus walked to the window and followed Graham's gaze. She's pretty, I'll give you that, but this obsession is unlike you. It's not obsession, it's research. Marcus laughed, though there was no humor in it. Research for what exactly? Graham, I've known you for 20 years. I've never seen you look at anyone like that, not even Victoria. The name sent ice through Graham's veins. He turned away from the window, his jaw tight. Victoria was a mistake, one I won't repeat. Then what are you planning? Graham was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. The board wants me married. They want stability, respectability. He paused. What if I gave them exactly what they wanted? Marcus's expression shifted from curiosity to alarm. You can't be serious. A contract, 1 year, mutually beneficial arrangement. Graham's amber eyes were calculating now, the businessman replacing the man. She needs money for her mother's surgery. I need someone who won't complicate things with emotional demands. You're talking about a human being, Graham, not a business acquisition. I'm talking about a solution. Graham moved to his desk, pulling out a folder. I've had the legal team draft preliminary terms. She gets full medical coverage for her mother, a generous monthly allowance, and at the end of the year, a settlement that would secure her family's future. Marcus shook his head slowly. And what do you get? Besides the obvious PR benefits? Graham didn't answer. The truth was, he wasn't entirely sure himself. Something about Juniper Halstead had gotten under his skin, and he needed to understand why. Keeping her close seemed like the only way to exercise this strange fascination. "Just be careful," Marcus said quietly. "Contracts can't control hearts, yours or hers." The next morning, Graham summoned Juniper to his office. She entered hesitantly, her eyes wide as they took in the sprawling space, the wall of windows overlooking the city, the modern art pieces, the shelves lined with awards and photographs. She looked impossibly small standing there, her hands clasped nervously before her. "Please sit." Graham gestured to the chair across from his desk. Juniper sat on the edge, her back straight, her gaze meeting his with surprising directness. Up close, he noticed details he'd missed before: the faint freckles across her nose, the way her lower lip was slightly fuller than the upper, the intelligence shimmering in her dark eyes. "I know about your mother's surgery," he said without preamble. Her face paled. "Sir, I know you can't afford it. I know your sister refused to help." His voice was flat, businesslike. "I know you've been working double shifts and still won't have enough." Juniper's hands tightened in her lap, but she didn't look away. "With all due respect, Mr. Pritchard, my personal circumstances are none of your concern." Graham felt an unexpected flicker of admiration. Most people cowered before him. She was terrified. He could see it in the rapid pulse at her throat, but she refused to crumble. "I can solve your problem," he continued. "All of it. The surgery, the treatment, the recovery. The best doctors in London." Hope and suspicion warred in her eyes. "Why would you do that?" "Because I want something in return." The hope died. Her expression hardened, and Graham realized she was expecting the worst, that he was just another powerful man trying to exploit her vulnerability. "Marry me," he said. Juniper blinked, then blinked again. "I'm sorry? A marriage of convenience. You help me stabilize my public image, and I pay for everything your mother needs." He slid the folder across the desk. 1-year contract. Public appearances as required. Separate bedrooms. No emotional entanglement. She stared at the folder as if it might bite her. "This is a joke. I don't joke about business. Marriage isn't business. Everything is business, Miss Halstead." Graham leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You have 24 hours to decide." Juniper stood abruptly, her cheeks flushed. "You're asking me to sell myself. I'm asking you to enter a mutually beneficial arrangement." His voice remained calm, though something stirred in his chest at her indignation. "Think of your mother. Think of your little sister. What wouldn't you do for them?" The words hit their mark. He watched her shoulders sag slightly, watched the fight drain from her eyes as reality crashed over her. 24 hours, he repeated. Not a minute more. She took the folder with trembling hands and left without another word. Graham remained at his desk long after she'd gone, staring at the door she'd closed behind her. He told himself this was purely strategic, a solution to multiple problems, nothing more. But he couldn't shake the image of her standing there, proud and frightened and utterly magnificent in her defiance. What had he gotten himself into? The streets of Whitechapel had never felt so narrow. Juniper walked through the familiar neighborhood in a daze, the folder clutched against her chest like a shield. The dim streetlights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across cracked pavements. The air was thick with the promise of rain, heavy and oppressive. Graham Pritchard's words echoed in her mind. Marry me. 1-year contract. No emotional entanglement. It was madness. Absolute madness. And yet, she paused outside her tiny terraced house, looking at the peeling paint on the door, the windows that let in drafts no matter how much newspaper she stuffed around the frames. Inside that house was everything she loved, and everything she stood to lose. The door creaked as she entered, the smell of her mother's lavender sachets mixed with the mustiness of old walls. In the dim living room, her mother lay on the worn sofa, a crocheted blanket pulled up to her chin. Her breathing was labored, each inhale a small struggle. Juniper. Her mother's voice was thin but warm. You're home late, darling. Just had to finish some things at work. Juniper forced a smile, setting down her bag. How are you feeling? Better today. Lily made me soup. On cue, Juniper's 10-year-old sister emerged from the kitchen, her small face too serious for her age. Lily had their mother's gentle eyes and their father's stubborn chin. The father who had walked out years ago and never looked back. "Mummy coughed a lot," Lily whispered, pulling Juniper aside. "More than yesterday." Juniper's heart clenched. She knelt down to Lily's level, tucking a strand of hair behind the girl's ear. "Thank you for taking care of her, sweetheart. You're such a brave girl." That night, after Lily had fallen asleep and her mother's breathing had finally eased into rest, Juniper sat at the kitchen table with the folder open before her. The contract was meticulous, covering every conceivable scenario: monthly allowances, public appearance schedules, confidentiality clauses. And there, in cold black type, full coverage of all medical expenses for immediate family members. She read it 3 times, searching for hidden traps, for small print that would destroy her. But it was straightforward. Ruthlessly so. 1 year of her life. That was all he was asking. Juniper thought about pride. That stubborn thing that had kept her going through every hardship. She thought about dignity, about self-respect, about all the things she'd been taught to value above money. Then she looked at her mother's medication bottles lined up on the counter, at the bills stuffed in the drawer she couldn't bring herself to open, at the photograph on the wall of their family before everything fell apart, when Charlotte still smiled at them, when their father still came home, when their mother could dance in the kitchen without losing her breath. What was pride worth if her mother died? A tear slipped down her cheek, then another. She let them fall, mourning the innocence she was about to surrender. By morning, her decision was made. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt like ascending to another world. Juniper's simple dress, the nicest thing she owned, seemed shabby against the marble and crystal surrounding her. But she held her head high as she walked past Charlotte's desk. Her sister's eyes widened. "What are you—" Juniper didn't stop. She knocked once on Graham's door and entered without waiting for permission. He was standing by the window, silhouetted against the grey London sky. When he turned, something flickered in those amber eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or satisfaction. She couldn't tell. "I accept," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'll marry you." Graham merely nodded, as if her capitulation had never been in doubt. He gestured to his desk, where a pen lay waiting beside fresh copies of the contract. "Read it again if you need to." "I've read it." Juniper approached the desk, her legs feeling like they belonged to someone else. "I have conditions." His eyebrow rose slightly. "Conditions?" "I want my mother transferred to the London Heart Centre immediately. I want Lily to have access to proper tutoring. And I want your word, not just a contract clause, that you'll never use any of this to humiliate me or my family." For a long moment, Graham studied her. Then, unexpectedly, the corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but close. "You have my word." Juniper picked up the pen. Her hand trembled as she signed her name, watching the ink seal her fate. When she finished, she set the pen down and looked up at him. "When do we begin?" "The ceremony will be Friday, civil service, private." He was all business again, collecting the signed papers. "My driver will pick you up Thursday evening to bring you to the residence. Pack whatever you need. That's 4 days from now." "Is that a problem?" Juniper swallowed. "No. It's just fast. Time is a luxury I don't have, Miss Halstead." His eyes met hers, and for just a moment, she thought she saw something human beneath the corporate mask. "Neither do you." He was right, of course. Her mother's condition worsened by the day. Juniper turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Mr. Pritchard?" "Yes. This is a business arrangement." "I understand that." She looked over her shoulder at him. "But I want you to know I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing it for them. The moment the year is up, I'm gone. Don't expect anything more." She left before he could respond, her heart pounding with fear and something else she couldn't name. Graham stood alone in his office, the signed contract in his hands, watching the door she'd closed behind her. Don't expect anything more. He should have been relieved by her clarity. Instead, her words left an inexplicable hollow in his chest. What had he expected? That she might actually want this? He dismissed the thought and reached for his phone. There were arrangements to make, a wedding to plan, a carefully constructed life to protect. Feelings had no place in any of it. The registry office smelled of old paper and furniture polish. Juniper stood before the magistrate in a cream-colored dress she'd found at a charity shop. Simple, elegant, nothing like the wedding gown she'd dreamed of as a little girl. No flowers, no music, no family, just witnesses she didn't know, and a groom who looked at her like she was a contract to be executed. Graham wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. His face was unreadable as the magistrate recited the standard vows, his amber eyes fixed somewhere above her head. "Do you, Graham Edward Pritchard, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice was steady, emotionless. Juniper felt something inside her wither. "And do you, Juniper Rose Halstead, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" She thought of her mother, already transferred to the best cardiac unit in London. She thought of Lily's face when she'd explained that everything would be all right now. She thought of the life she was leaving behind. "I do." The magistrate pronounced them married. There was no kiss. Graham simply nodded at her, signed the register, and gestured toward the door. Outside, a black Mercedes waited, its engine purring softly. "My driver will take you to the estate," Graham said, checking his phone. "I have meetings this afternoon." "On your wedding day?" He looked up, something flickering in his eyes. "This isn't a real wedding day, Mrs. Pritchard. It's a transaction. I suggest you remember that." The words stung more than they should have. Juniper lifted her chin. "Perfectly clear, Mr. Pritchard." She climbed into the car without looking back. The Pritchard estate lay an hour outside London, hidden behind towering iron gates and centuries-old oak trees. As the car wound up the gravel drive, Juniper pressed her face to the window, her breath catching in her throat. The mansion was magnificent. Georgian architecture softened by climbing roses, tall windows reflecting the autumn sky, manicured gardens stretching as far as she could see. Fountains burbled in the courtyard. Stone lions guarded the entrance. It was beautiful and utterly intimidating. A housekeeper named Mrs. Chen greeted her at the door, a stern-faced woman in her 60s whose eyes softened slightly when she took in Juniper's overwhelmed expression. "Welcome, Mrs. Pritchard. I'll show you to your quarters." The interior was even more imposing than the exterior. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, artwork that belonged in museums. Juniper followed Mrs. Chen through endless corridors, past rooms she couldn't begin to imagine purposes for. Her bedroom was larger than her entire house in Whitechapel. A four-poster bed dominated one wall draped in ivory silk. French doors opened onto a private balcony overlooking the gardens. Fresh flowers perfumed the air. "Mr. Pritchard's quarters are in the East Wing," Mrs. Chen explained. "Dinner is served at 7 in the small dining room. Do you require anything else?" Juniper shook her head, not trusting her voice. When the door closed, she sank onto the bed and let the tears fall. What had she done? The first dinner was excruciating. The small dining room could have hosted 20 people comfortably. Juniper sat at one end of a polished table, Graham at the other, with enough space between them to land a plane. Servants moved silently, delivering course after course of food she couldn't taste. Graham didn't speak. He ate mechanically, his attention on documents beside his plate, occasionally making notes in the margins. Juniper pushed her food around, studying him when she thought he wasn't looking. In the candlelight, the sharp angles of his face seemed softer. She noticed the dark circles under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened when he read something that displeased him. He was exhausted, she realized, carrying weights she couldn't see. "The lamb is excellent," she offered, breaking the silence. Graham looked up as if he'd forgotten she was there. "Mrs. Chen will arrange menus to your preference. Let her know if there's anything you don't like." "I'm not fussy." "Good." He returned to his documents. The silence stretched on. When the meal finally ended, Graham stood without ceremony. "I'll be working late. Don't wait up." He left her alone with the servants and the echoing emptiness of a house that would never feel like home. The days that followed blurred together. Juniper explored the mansion during daylight hours, losing herself in corridors and discovering rooms filled with treasures. A music room with a grand piano, a conservatory overflowing with exotic plants, and best of all, a library that stole her breath. 3 stories of books, leather-bound classics, first editions behind glass, comfortable chairs tucked into corners, ladders on rails to reach the highest shelves. She spent hours there, reading novels she'd only dreamed of owning, curled up in a window seat while rain streaked the glass. It was the only place in the vast estate where she felt something approaching peace. It was there that she met Antonio. The elderly gardener had worked for the Pritchard family for 40 years. He had kind eyes, weathered hands, and a gentle way of speaking that reminded Juniper of her grandfather. "The roses are my pride," he told her one afternoon, showing her the gardens. "Each variety has its own personality. This one," he gestured to a bush of pale pink blooms, "is stubborn, refuses to flower unless you talk to it." Juniper laughed, the sound surprising her. "You talk to your roses?" "Every morning." Antonio's eyes twinkled. "They're better listeners than most people." For the first time since her arrival, Juniper felt a spark of genuine happiness. She asked Antonio about the different flowers, about the history of the gardens, about his life at the estate. He answered patiently, seeming pleased by her interest. Neither of them noticed Graham watching from his study window above, his expression unreadable as he observed his wife laughing with the gardener. Something dark and unfamiliar coiled in his chest. He turned away from the window, jaw tight, and told himself it didn't matter. But that night at dinner, his voice was colder than usual. "I see you've been making friends." Juniper looked up from her soup. "I'm sorry?" "Antonio." "The gardener." Graham's amber eyes were hard. "You seemed quite entertained by his company." She frowned, confused by his tone. "He was showing me the rose garden. He's very knowledgeable." "I'm sure he is." The words dripped with something that sounded almost like accusation. Juniper set down her spoon, meeting his gaze directly. "Antonio has been nothing but kind to me. Is there a problem with that?" Graham's jaw tightened. For a moment he seemed about to say something sharp. Then he simply returned to his meal. "No problem at all." But his knuckles were white around his fork, and the silence that followed was colder than any that had come before. 2 weeks into the marriage, Juniper had catalogued every one of Graham Pritchard's infuriating habits. He never asked for help, even when drowning in work. He responded with cutting sarcasm whenever she tried to make conversation. He invaded her personal space during arguments, standing so close she could smell his cologne and feel the heat radiating from his body. And he had an unsettling way of appearing silently in doorways, watching her with those intense amber eyes, before disappearing without a word. What irritated her most was that he seemed entirely unaffected by her presence. She was furniture to him, a prop for his public image. She refused to admit, even to herself, that his indifference stung. Graham, for his part, was cataloguing his own list. His wife talked incessantly when nervous, filling silences with observations about the weather, questions about the artwork, comments about books she was reading. She bit her lower lip when concentrating, a habit that drew his attention to her mouth far more often than was appropriate. She organized everything she touched, including, to his fury, the papers on his desk. "Where is the Henderson file?" he demanded one evening, storming into the library where she sat reading. Juniper looked up calmly. "On the left side of your desk, third stack. It was mixed in with the quarterly reports. I had a system. You had chaos." She returned to her book. "You're welcome." He stood there, speechless with irritation, watching her turn pages as if she hadn't just reorganized his entire professional life. The worst part was that her system actually made sense. He'd found the Henderson file in seconds. "Stay out of my study," he said finally. "Gladly." She didn't look up. "Your study smells like frustration and expensive regret anyway." Graham opened his mouth to retort, then closed it. Was that a joke? From her? He retreated before she could see the reluctant smile tugging at his lips. But there were other things, smaller things, that caught him off guard. She left handwritten thank you notes for the staff, tucked under pillows and beside coffee cups. She made tea during rainstorms, the scent of chamomile drifting through the corridors. She remembered everyone's names, asking Mrs. Chen about her grandson's football match, inquiring after the driver's wife who'd been ill. She was kind, genuinely, unfailingly kind, and it unsettled Graham more than he could explain. One afternoon, he found her in the library on a ladder, stretching to reach a book on the highest shelf. Her fingertips brushed the spine, but she couldn't quite grasp it. He watched her strain, rise on her toes, nearly lose her balance. For God's sake. He crossed the room in 3 strides and plucked the book from the shelf with ease, his chest pressed against her back, his arm reaching past her shoulder. Juniper froze, acutely aware of his body surrounding hers, the warmth of him seeping through her thin cardigan. "You could have asked," he said, his voice low near her ear. "I almost had it." Her own voice came out breathless. "You almost broke your neck." He stepped back, handing her the book. Their fingers brushed and something electric passed between them. Juniper looked up into his amber eyes and saw something there she couldn't name, something that made her heart stutter. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual cool mask. "Try not to kill yourself in my library," he said. "The paperwork would be tedious." He left, and Juniper clutched the book to her chest, willing her pulse to slow. The storm came 3 nights later. It began as distant thunder, rumbling across the countryside like a warning. By midnight, it had become a tempest, lightning splitting the sky, rain hammering the windows, wind howling through the ancient oaks. Juniper sat in the library trying to read, but every crack of thunder made her flinch. She'd been afraid of storms since childhood, since the night her father had left during a storm just like this one, walking out the door and never coming back. The power went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Juniper's book fell from her trembling hands as lightning illuminated the library in stark white flashes. She pressed herself into the corner of the sofa, arms wrapped around her knees, fighting the panic rising in her chest. She didn't hear the door open. "Juniper?" Graham's voice cut through the darkness. A beam of light appeared, a torch, sweeping across the room until it found her huddled form. "The power," she started. "I know. The whole estate is out." He moved closer, and in the torchlight, his face looked different, softer, almost concerned. "Are you all right?" "Fine," she lied, her voice shaking. Thunder crashed directly overhead. Juniper gasped, her whole body jerking with fear. Before she could stop herself, tears were streaming down her cheeks. Graham sat down beside her. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that she could feel his presence like an anchor in the storm. "You're afraid of storms," he said quietly. "Not a question. Since I was a child." She wiped her eyes, embarrassed. "It's foolish. Fear is never foolish." He was silent for a moment. "I was afraid of the dark when I was young. My mother used to sit with me until I fell asleep." Juniper looked at him, surprised by the confession. He had never mentioned his mother before. "Where is she now?" "She passed when I was 12. His voice was carefully neutral. "Cancer. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago." They sat in silence as the storm raged outside. Somehow Graham's presence steadied her. The thunder still made her jump, but the panic receded, replaced by something calmer. "Tell me about your mother," he said unexpectedly. "The one we're saving." Juniper smiled despite herself. "She's wonderful. Warm and funny and stubborn. She used to dance in the kitchen while cooking, waltzing with the broom, singing off-key." Her voice caught. "She can't do that anymore. Can't catch her breath." "She will again." Graham's voice was firm. "The doctors at the Heart Center are the best in Europe." "I know, thank you." She turned to look at him, really look at him. "Why did you do this, Graham, really? You could have found anyone to play this role." He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rougher than usual. "I don't know." The admission seemed to surprise even him. "Something about you. You're different from anyone I've met. You don't want anything from me except what I offered. You don't try to manipulate or impress. You just..." "Ah." Their eyes met in the torchlight. The storm seemed suddenly distant. The world narrowed to this room, this moment, the space between them. "Graham!" The lights flickered back on, flooding the library with harsh brightness. The spell broke. Graham stood abruptly, clearing his throat. "The power's back. You should get some sleep." He was at the door before she could respond. "Graham?" He paused, but didn't turn. "Thank you for sitting with me. Don't mention it." He left, and Juniper sat alone in the bright, empty library, her heart full of questions she was afraid to answer. Something had changed tonight. She felt it in her bones. The only question was whether either of them would be brave enough to acknowledge it. The business conference in Edinburgh was unavoidable. Graham had tried to attend alone, but his father had been insistent. "Bring your wife. The investors want to see stability, not a man who leaves his bride at home after 3 weeks of marriage." So here they were, sitting in first class on the train north, the Scottish countryside rolling past in shades of green and grey. Juniper stared out the window, acutely aware of Graham's presence beside her, the way his shoulder occasionally brushed hers when the train swayed, the scent of his cologne mixing with the smell of fresh coffee. They hadn't spoken about the night of the storm. In the days that followed, Graham had retreated behind his walls, more distant than ever, but sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher, and the memory of his confession in the dark library haunted her dreams. "The conference lasts 3 days," Graham said, breaking the silence. "There will be dinners, networking events. You'll need to play the part. I understand my role." "Do you?" He turned to look at her, his amber eyes searching. "These people are sharks, Juniper. They'll circle you looking for weaknesses. One wrong word and they'll smell blood. Then perhaps you should have married someone from your world." She kept her voice light, but the words carried an edge. "Someone who knows the rules." "Perhaps." His gaze didn't waver. "But I didn't." Something in his tone made her breath catch. Before she could respond, his phone rang, and the moment dissolved into business talk she couldn't follow. The hotel in Edinburgh was magnificent, a converted castle overlooking the city, all stone turrets and ancient elegance. Graham handled check-in, while Juniper admired the vaulted ceilings and medieval tapestries. "Mr. and Mrs. Pritchard," the concierge's voice was apologetic. "I'm terribly sorry, but there seems to have been an error with your reservation. We have you booked for a standard suite rather than the 2-bedroom accommodation your office requested." Graham's jaw tightened. "What exactly does that mean?" "The suite has only 1 bed, sir, a king-sized bed." The concierge wrung his hands. "We're fully booked due to the conference. I can offer you a complimentary upgrade to our honeymoon suite, but I'm afraid it also has only 1 bed." Juniper felt heat creep up her neck. She glanced at Graham, whose expression had turned to stone. "We'll take the honeymoon suite," he said flatly. "Send up champagne. Make it look intentional." The honeymoon suite was absurdly romantic. Rose petals scattered across the enormous bed, candles waiting to be lit, a bathroom with a tub large enough for 2. Juniper stood in the doorway, her suitcase forgotten at her feet. "I'll sleep on the sofa," Graham said, already loosening his tie. "Don't be ridiculous. That sofa is half your size." She forced practicality into her voice, ignoring the way her heart raced. "We're adults. We can share a bed without anything happening." He turned to look at her, something dangerous flickering in his eyes. "Can we?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Juniper swallowed hard. "I trust you," she said quietly. "Do you trust me?" A muscle twitched in his jaw. "I don't trust anyone. I know." She held his gaze. "But maybe you could start." The silence stretched. Then Graham nodded once, curtly, and disappeared into the bathroom. That first night was torture. They lay on opposite sides of the vast bed, a careful distance between them, both staring at the ceiling. Juniper was intensely aware of every sound he made, the rustle of sheets when he shifted, the rhythm of his breathing, the warmth radiating from his body despite the space separating them. Sleep came in fitful snatches. She dreamed of storms and strong arms and amber eyes that saw too much. When she woke, the grey Edinburgh dawn was seeping through the curtains, and Graham was gone. His side of the bed was cold, but his pillow still held the impression of his head. She pressed her face into it before she could stop herself, breathing in his scent. What was happening to her? The conference was everything Graham had warned her about. Elegant predators in expensive suits, circling each other with champagne glasses and sharp smiles. Juniper felt exposed in her simple emerald dress, surrounded by women dripping with diamonds and designer labels. But something unexpected happened. She found she could hold her own. Years of navigating difficult customers at her mother's shop, of placating landlords and negotiating with bill collectors, had given her skills these privileged people couldn't imagine. She listened more than she spoke, asked thoughtful questions, remembered names and details. By the second day, investors were seeking her out, charmed by her warmth and genuine interest. Graham watched from across crowded rooms, his expression unreadable, but she caught the flicker of surprise when a shipping magnate complimented her intelligence, the flash of something darker when a young heir lingered too long at her side. "Your wife is delightful," the heir said to Graham at that evening's dinner, his smile too familiar. "Wherever did you find her?" "She found me." Graham's hand settled on the small of Juniper's back, possessive and warm. I was lucky enough to recognize what I had. Juniper's heart stuttered. She looked up at him, but his face revealed nothing. Later, back in their suite, the tension finally broke. "You were magnificent today," Graham said, pouring himself a whiskey. "I didn't expect—" He stopped, seeming to catch himself. Didn't expect what? That the intern could string sentences together? The words came out sharper than intended, fueled by exhaustion and confusion, and the constant ache of wanting something she couldn't name. That someone from Whitechapel could navigate your precious circles? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? She stood before him, trembling with emotions she couldn't control. What do you want from me, Graham? You keep me at arm's length, then look at me like what? His voice was rough. He set down his glass and stepped closer, invading her space the way he always did when emotions ran high. Tell me, Juniper, how do I look at you? Like you're drowning. The words escaped before she could stop them. Like I'm the only thing keeping you afloat and you hate me for it. Something cracked in his expression. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. I don't hate you. His voice was barely a whisper. God help me, I should. It would be so much easier if I did. Graham, my ex-fiancée betrayed me. The confession tumbled out like water breaking through a dam. Victoria. She was working with my former business partner, feeding him information, helping him try to destroy everything I'd built. I loved her and she used that love as a weapon. When I discovered the truth, he closed his eyes briefly, pain etched in every line of his face. I swore I would never let anyone that close again. Juniper's heart broke for him. She reached up, covering his hand with her own. I'm not her, she said softly. I would never... I know. His eyes opened, burning into hers. That's what terrifies me. The space between them had shrunk to nothing. She could feel his breath on her lips, see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes, feel the tremor in the hand that cradled her face. We shouldn't, he whispered, even as he leaned closer. I know, she breathed back. And then he kissed her. It started soft, tentative, questioning, as if asking permission with every brush of his lips. But when she responded, rising on her toes to press closer, something ignited. The kiss deepened, became desperate, his arms wrapping around her waist and pulling her against the solid wall of his chest. Juniper had been kissed before, clumsy attempts by nervous boys who didn't know what they were doing. This was nothing like that. This was fire and hunger, and a tenderness that made her want to weep. His mouth moved over hers like he was memorizing her, worshipping her, claiming her in ways the contract never could. When they finally broke apart, both gasping for air, Graham's forehead rested against hers. You've never... His voice was hoarse. I can tell you haven't... No. She couldn't lie to him. I was waiting for... I don't know what I was waiting for. Something shifted in his eyes. Tenderness battling desire, battling fear. He stepped back, releasing her with visible effort. Then we stop here. His voice was strained. I won't take something you can't give back. Not like this. Not when everything between us is so tangled. Juniper wanted to argue. Her whole body ached with wanting him. But she understood what he was offering. Respect, restraint, a chance to be certain. Okay, she whispered. Graham nodded once. Then he grabbed his jacket and walked out of the suite without another word. Juniper sank onto the bed, pressing her fingers to her swollen lips, still feeling the ghost of his kiss. Everything had changed, and nothing would ever be the same again. The morning after the kiss, Graham was ice. He sat across from her at breakfast, hidden behind a newspaper, responding to her attempts at conversation with monosyllables. The warmth of the previous night had vanished completely, replaced by a coldness that cut deeper than any insult. Juniper told herself it didn't matter, told herself this was always how it would be, moments of connection followed by walls slamming shut. She buttered her toast with mechanical precision and refused to let him see how much his withdrawal hurt. The final day of the conference brought a gala dinner in the castle's great hall. Juniper dressed with particular care, choosing a flowing champagne-colored gown that skimmed her curves and left her shoulders bare. She pinned her hair up, leaving a few tendrils to frame her face, and applied minimal makeup that emphasized her natural features. When she emerged from the bathroom, Graham was adjusting his bow tie in the mirror. He turned, and for one unguarded moment, his mask slipped. His eyes traveled over her slowly, darkening with something that made her skin flush. Then the mask returned. "You look adequate," he said coolly. "Shall we?" Adequate. Juniper felt the word like a slap, but she lifted her chin and took his offered arm without comment. The gala was a whirlwind of music, laughter, and glittering chandeliers. Juniper threw herself into conversations with a brightness she didn't feel, determined not to let Graham see how his rejection affected her. She danced with business associates, laughed at jokes, accepted compliments with gracious smiles. And men noticed her. They always had. She simply hadn't paid attention before. But tonight, freed from the weight of Graham's attention, she saw how they looked at her. The young heir from the previous day appeared at her elbow repeatedly. A French investor complimented her intelligence and her beauty in the same breath. A silver-haired Scottish lord asked for a second dance, then a third. From across the room, Graham watched. He stood rigid by the bar, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand, his jaw so tight it could have cut glass. Every time another man made Juniper laugh, every time someone touched her arm or leaned too close, something dark and possessive clawed at his chest. Jealousy. He recognized it for what it was, even as he despised himself for feeling it. She wasn't his. Not really. This was a business arrangement. He had no right to the fury burning in his veins, no claim to the woman who was currently smiling up at the French investor like he'd hung the moon. "You're going to shatter that glass." Marcus appeared beside him, eyebrows raised in amusement. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" Marcus followed his gaze to where Juniper was accepting yet another dance invitation. "For a man who insists this marriage is purely contractual, you certainly look like a husband watching other men court his wife. She can dance with whoever she wants." "Of course she can. The question is, why does it bother you so much that she is?" Graham didn't answer. He couldn't, because the truth was too dangerous to speak aloud. The gala ended late, but sleep was impossible. A storm had rolled in, fitting, Graham thought bitterly, and their flight home was cancelled. Another night in Edinburgh. Another night in that damned honeymoon suite with its single bed and rose petals and the ghost of their kiss hanging in the air. Juniper was removing her earrings when he entered the suite. She glanced at him in the mirror, her expression carefully neutral. "I assume the flight is cancelled. Until tomorrow afternoon. The storm should pass by morning." "Of course it should." She set down the earrings and turned to face him. "Well, good night then." "Juniper, wait." She paused, one hand on the bathroom door. "Why are you being like this?" The words burst out before he could stop them. "Laughing with those men, letting them..." "Letting them what?" Her eyes flashed. "Treat me like a human being? Show me basic courtesy and attention? I'm terribly sorry if my having pleasant conversations offended you." "That wasn't conversation. That was what, Graham?" She stepped closer, her temper finally breaking free. "Tell me, because I'm genuinely confused. You kiss me like you actually feel something, then you spend the entire next day acting like I'm furniture. You don't get to reject me and then be angry when others don't." "I didn't reject you. You called me adequate. You've barely looked at me all day. Because looking at you is dangerous." His voice rose, the carefully controlled mask cracking at last. "Because every time I look at you, I want things I have no right to want. Because that kiss..." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "That kiss was a mistake." The hurt in her eyes nearly undid him. "A mistake," she repeated quietly. "Not because..." He forced himself to breathe. "Not because I didn't want it." "God, Juniper. I wanted it more than I've wanted anything in years. But you deserve better than a broken man who doesn't know how to love without fear. You deserve someone whole." The fight drained from her posture. She moved toward him slowly, stopping just inches away. "What if I don't want someone whole?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "What if I want someone real? Someone who's been hurt but keeps going anyway? Someone who sits with me during storms and pretends he doesn't care but shows up every time it matters?" Graham closed his eyes. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." Her hand came up to rest on his chest, over his racing heart. "Victoria broke something in you. I understand that. But I'm not her, Graham. I never could be. I don't want your money or your power or your company. I just want..." "What?" His voice was raw. "What do you want?" She looked up at him with those impossibly honest eyes. "I want you to stop being afraid of me." Something inside him shattered. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, not gently this time, but desperately, pouring years of loneliness and fear and desperate hope into the press of his lips. She responded with equal fervor, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. "I'm terrified of you," he admitted against her mouth. "You've gotten under my skin in ways I don't understand. Every rule I made for myself, every wall I built, you walk right through them like they're nothing." "Good." She kissed the corner of his mouth, his jaw, his throat. "Those walls were keeping you prisoner." He held her tighter, breathing her in, the scent of flowers and something uniquely juniper that had become essential to him without his permission. "This changes everything," he said. "You understand that? If we do this, guys, there's no going back to pretending." "I don't want to go back." She pulled away just enough to meet his eyes. "I want to go forward, with you, however slowly you need to go." Graham stared at her for a long moment, this woman who had stumbled into his life and turned everything upside down. Then, for the first time in as long as he could remember, he smiled. A real smile, unguarded and full of wonder. "Forward it is," he whispered, and when he kissed her again it felt like coming home. They held each other through the night, talking in whispers, sharing secrets they'd never told anyone. The storm raged outside, but inside their cocoon of warmth and tentative trust, something beautiful was beginning to grow. Neither of them knew what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, they were willing to find out together. The journey back to London felt different. Graham held Juniper's hand throughout the train ride, his thumb tracing absent patterns on her skin. Small gestures that meant everything. The way he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, how his eyes softened when they met hers, the gentle pressure of his shoulder against hers. They didn't speak much. Words seemed inadequate for what had shifted between them. But the silence was warm now, filled with possibility rather than tension. Back at the estate, the changes were subtle, but unmistakable. Graham began appearing for breakfast instead of leaving before dawn. He kissed her forehead each morning, a brief touch that sent warmth flooding through her entire body. He called her Uni, a nickname that made her heart flutter every time it crossed his lips. "Uni," he'd say, appearing in the library doorway. "Come see the sunset from the terrace." "Uni," he'd murmur, adjusting her coat collar before they left for events. "You'll catch cold." Uni. Just her name, spoken softly when he found her reading in his study, curled up in his leather chair like she belonged there, and she was beginning to believe she did. He touched her constantly now, small, possessive gestures that felt as natural as breathing, his hand on her lower back when they walked, his fingers intertwined with hers at dinner, his arm around her shoulders when they sat together in the evenings, her head resting against his chest while he read reports and she devoured novels. They hadn't made love. Graham was insistent on that point, determined to wait until the tangled circumstances of their marriage felt less like obligation and more like choice. But the intimacy they shared was deeper than physical. Whispered conversations in the dark, shared laughter over breakfast, the growing certainty that they were building something real. Juniper had never been happier, which made the discovery all the more devastating. It happened by accident. She was looking for a pen in Graham's study when she noticed the file on his desk, marked confidential in red letters with her sister's name on the tab. Curiosity got the better of her. She opened it. The documents inside made her blood run cold. Financial records, bank statements, transaction histories showing systematic transfers from company accounts to offshore holdings, all traced back to Charlotte Halstead, executive secretary. Her sister was embezzling from Pritchard Industries. "You found it!" Juniper spun around. Graham stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "How long have you known?" Her voice came out strangled. 3 weeks. My forensic accountants flagged the discrepancies. He moved into the room, closing the door behind him. "I've been building a case quietly. I didn't want to tell you until I had all the evidence." "Why not?" Tears burned her eyes. "Did you think I was involved?" "No." He reached for her, pulling her close despite her rigid posture. "Never. But I knew this would hurt you, and I wanted to protect you from it as long as possible." "She's stealing from you." Juniper pressed her face against his chest, overwhelmed. "My own sister is stealing from the man I—" She stopped, the words catching in her throat. Graham's arms tightened around her. The man you what? She couldn't say it. Not yet. Not with this chaos swirling around them. What will happen to her? She asked instead. She'll be prosecuted. There's no way around it. The amounts are too significant. His voice was gentle but firm. I'm sorry, Junie. I know she's your family. She stopped being my family the day she looked at our dying mother and chose Monaco over her life. Bitterness laced Juniper's words. Do what you need to do. I won't stand in your way. Graham tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. You're extraordinary. Do you know that? Any other woman would be begging me to let her sister go. Any other woman isn't me. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of unspoken promises. But the peace didn't last. 2 days later, Charlotte appeared at the estate. Juniper was in the garden with Antonio, learning about winter pruning when the sleek black car pulled up the drive. Her sister emerged like a predator scenting blood, designer heels clicking against the gravel. We need to talk. Charlotte's voice was ice. Alone. Antonio quietly excused himself, casting a worried glance at Juniper before disappearing into the greenhouse. How did you get past the gate? Juniper kept her voice steady. I still have my employee credentials. For now. Charlotte's smile was sharp as broken glass. But I suspect that won't last much longer, will it? I know Graham's investigating me. I know you know. Then you know there's nothing to discuss. Oh, but there is. Charlotte stepped closer, her perfume cloying in the crisp autumn air. You see, I've been doing some investigating of my own. About your little marriage, the timing, the contract. Her eyes glittered with malice. It's all fake, isn't it? A business arrangement. The desperate intern selling herself to the billionaire. Juniper felt the blood drain from her face. I have sources, Charlotte continued. People who talk when properly motivated. If this story reaches the press, and it will unless you convince your husband to drop his investigation, you'll both be ruined. The scandal will destroy him. And you? She laughed, cruel and cold. You'll be exposed as the gold-digging fraud you are. I'm not. Save it. Charlotte's mask of elegance cracked, revealing the ugliness beneath. You have 1 week. Convince Graham to let this go, or I'll burn everything down. Including you. She turned and walked back to her car without another word, leaving Juniper standing alone in the garden, her carefully constructed happiness crumbling around her. That evening, she told Graham everything. He listened in silence, his jaw tightening with each word. When she finished, he pulled her into his arms with fierce protectiveness. She won't touch you, he promised, his voice rough with barely contained fury. I won't let anyone hurt you. Not your sister. Not anyone. But the scandal, let her try. His amber eyes burned with determination. I've survived worse, and I'd rather face 1,000 scandals than lose you. Juniper clung to him, wanting desperately to believe, but fear had taken root in her heart, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Victoria Lancaster had always known how to make an entrance. She swept into Pritchard Industries on a Tuesday morning, wearing a dress that left little to the imagination, and a smile that promised trouble. Her blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders in perfect waves, her makeup flawless, her confidence radiating like a weapon. Juniper saw her from across the lobby. She had come to surprise Graham with lunch, something she'd started doing since their return from Edinburgh. Now she stood frozen by the elevator, watching her husband's ex-fiancée saunter toward the reception desk like she owned the building. I'm here to see Graham Pritchard. Victoria's voice carried, deliberately loud. Tell him Victoria is here. He'll want to see me. The receptionist stammered, clearly intimidated. Juniper straightened her spine and moved forward before she could second-guess herself. I'm afraid my husband is quite busy today. She kept her voice pleasant, her smile serene. If you have business matters to discuss, I suggest scheduling through the proper channels. Victoria turned slowly, her blue eyes narrowing as she took in Juniper's simple dress and understated elegance. Recognition flickered across her features, and something darker. Jealousy, perhaps, or contempt. Ah, the new wife. Victoria's smile turned predatory. I've heard about you. The charity case from the mailroom or wherever. Marketing, actually. But I appreciate your interest in my career history. How quaint. Victoria stepped closer, her perfume overwhelming. Enjoy it while it lasts, darling. Graham has a pattern. He gets bored quickly, and when he does, he always comes back to what he knows. Juniper felt her composure waver but held firm. If that were true, you wouldn't be standing in the lobby trying to see him. You'd be in his office, or his bed. Victoria's smile flickered. My husband and I are quite happy, Juniper continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Whatever you had with him is over. I suggest you accept that and move on with dignity. Or don't. But either way, if you want to discuss business, schedule an appointment. Now if you'll excuse me. She turned and walked toward the elevator, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. Behind her she heard Victoria's outraged gasp, followed by the click of heels as she demanded to speak with someone in charge. Juniper didn't look back. Upstairs, she found Graham in his office, reviewing contracts with Marcus. Both men looked up when she entered, Graham's face immediately softening at the sight of her. Uni, I wasn't expecting... He noticed her expression and rose from his chair. What's wrong? Victoria is downstairs. She wants to see you. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Graham's jaw tightened, his amber eyes hardening to cold fire. Did she speak to you? We exchanged words. Juniper tried to sound nonchalant. I may have suggested she schedule an appointment through proper channels. Marcus let out a surprised laugh. I would have paid money to see that. But Graham wasn't laughing. He rounded his desk and cupped Juniper's face in his hands, searching her eyes. Are you all right? I'm fine. She's just... I know exactly what she is. His voice was low, dangerous. Wait here. He was gone before she could protest, his long strides carrying him toward the elevator. Marcus exchanged a glance with Juniper. I should probably follow him, he said. Make sure there are witnesses. They found Victoria in the lobby arguing with security. Graham's arrival silenced everyone. He stood before his ex-fiancée like a thundercloud given human form, his presence commanding the attention of every person in the vicinity. Victoria. His voice was ice. You have exactly 30 seconds to explain why you're harassing my wife and my staff. Darling, I was merely... Oh, don't call me that. The words cracked like a whip. You lost that right when you sold my company's secrets to Harrison. When you tried to destroy everything I built while pretending to love me. Victoria's composure finally cracked. I made a mistake, Graham. Everyone makes mistakes. But we had something real once. You can't deny that. I don't deny it. I also don't repeat it. He stepped forward, his presence overwhelming. What we had is dead. You killed it. And whatever game you're playing now, showing up here, trying to intimidate my wife, it ends today. Your wife? Victoria laughed, though it sounded desperate now. That girl is nothing, a convenience. Everyone knows your marriage is a sham. Everyone is wrong. Graham's voice softened unexpectedly, but his eyes never left Victoria's face. Juniper is the best thing that's ever happened to me. She's kind where you were cruel, genuine where you were calculating. She makes me want to be a better man. He paused. You made me want to be alone forever. The lobby had gone utterly silent. Juniper stood frozen by the elevator, tears pricking her eyes at his public declaration. Don't come back, Graham said finally. Don't contact me, don't approach my wife. If I see you anywhere near either of us again, I will make sure every door in London closes to you permanently. Do we understand each other? Victoria's face crumpled. Without another word, she turned and fled through the revolving doors. Graham watched her go, his shoulders tense. Then he turned and saw Juniper standing there, tears streaming down her cheeks. In 3 strides, he crossed the lobby and pulled her into his arms. Graham, everyone is watching. Let them watch. And before she could protest further, he kissed her. Not gently. This kiss was a declaration, a claim, a promise made before witnesses. His hands tangled in her hair, tilting her head back as he poured everything he felt into the press of his lips. When they finally broke apart, Juniper was breathless, her cheeks flushed, her heart soaring. I meant every word, he murmured against her lips. You're not a convenience, you're everything. She kissed him again, right there in the lobby of Pritchard Industries, surrounded by gawking employees and flashing phones. Neither of them cared. Some declarations were worth making in public. The days following the confrontation with Victoria were filled with a tenderness Juniper had never experienced. Graham was different now, softer, more present. He left work early to walk with her through the gardens. He read poetry aloud, while she rested her head in his lap. He held her hand during dinners, his thumb tracing circles on her palm, while they talked about everything and nothing. But beneath the sweetness, tension simmered. Every touch lingered a moment too long. Every glance held promises neither dared speak aloud. The air between them crackled with unspoken desire. One evening, Graham appeared in the library doorway wearing a perfectly tailored dark suit, his amber eyes gleaming with mysterious intent. "Get dressed," he said. "Something elegant. I'm taking you somewhere special." Juniper chose a flowing champagne-colored gown, the same one from Edinburgh, because she'd seen how he looked at her in it. When she descended the staircase, Graham's breath caught visibly. "You're stunning," he murmured, offering his arm. "But then you always are." The car drove them into the heart of London, stopping at a restaurant she'd only seen in magazines. Situated on the Thames, it offered views of the illuminated city through floor-to-ceiling windows. Boats drifted past, their lights dancing on the dark water. The scent of jasmine wafted from flower arrangements on every table. Their table was private, tucked into an alcove overlooking the river. Candles flickered between them, casting golden shadows across Graham's handsome face. "What's the occasion?" Juniper asked, accepting a glass of champagne. "Do I need an occasion to spoil my wife?" The word sent warmth flooding through her. Wife. It had started as a legal technicality. Now it felt like something precious. They talked for hours, about his childhood dreams of being a pilot before responsibility claimed him, about her mother's improving health. The surgery had been successful, recovery progressing well, about Lily's new school and her excitement over making friends, about futures neither had dared imagine. "I never thought I'd have this," Graham admitted, his voice low. "After Victoria, I convinced myself love was a weakness, a weapon people used to destroy you." His eyes met hers across the candlelight. "You've proven me wrong in every way." "Graham, let me finish." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "I know how this started. Business arrangement, convenient solution. But somewhere along the way, you became essential to me. I can't imagine my life without you in it." Tears blurred her vision. "I feel the same. I didn't expect to fall for you. I was so determined to keep my distance, to protect my heart. But you made it impossible." "Good." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I don't want your distance, Junie. I want all of you." After dinner, instead of driving to the estate, Graham directed his driver to a different address. Juniper watched in confusion as they stopped before a sleek high-rise in the city center. "My private apartment," he explained, helping her from the car. "My refuge from the world. I've never brought anyone here." The elevator carried them to the penthouse. When Graham opened the door, Juniper gasped. The space had been transformed. White rose petals carpeted the floor, creating a fragrant path through the modern apartment. Candles of varying heights lined every surface, their flames casting warm, dancing light. Soft instrumental music drifted from hidden speakers, something classical and achingly romantic. "You did this?" she whispered. "I wanted tonight to be perfect." His voice was rough with emotion. "I wanted you to know how much you mean to me." He turned her gently, his lips finding the curve of her shoulder. She shivered as he slowly lowered the zipper of her gown, the fabric whispering as it pooled at her feet. His hands were reverent, tracing her skin like she was something precious. Graham lifted her effortlessly, carrying her through the candlelit apartment to the private terrace. There, surrounded by the glittering London skyline, a jacuzzi waited. Filled with warm water and floating rose petals, more candles flickering around its edge, they sank into the water together, the heat enveloping them like an embrace. Graham pulled her close, her back against his chest, his arms wrapped around her waist. "I love you," he murmured against her ear. "I should have said it sooner. I was afraid. But I'm not anymore." Juniper turned in his arms, facing him. Water droplets clung to his dark hair, his amber eyes burning with intensity and tenderness. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have since the night of the storm, maybe even before." He kissed her then, slowly, deeply, with all the passion they'd been holding back. His hands explored her with gentle reverence, learning every curve, every sensitive place that made her gasp. When he finally carried her to the bedroom, laying her on sheets scattered with more petals, Juniper felt no fear. Only love, trust, and overwhelming desire. He was patient, tender. He worshipped her with his touch, his kisses, his whispered words of adoration. When they finally came together, it was with tears in her eyes, not from pain, but from the profound intimacy of being truly seen, truly cherished. Afterward, he held her close, their legs tangled together, her head resting over his heart. "No regrets?" he asked softly. "None." She pressed a kiss to his chest. "Only gratitude. For you. For this. For everything." Graham tightened his arms around her, pressing his lips to her hair. "This is real now," he said. "Whatever started as contract or convenience, it's real. You're mine, Uni, and I'm yours." She smiled against his skin, feeling complete for the first time in her life. "Forever," she promised. Neither of them knew that tomorrow would bring the storm that threatened to destroy everything they'd built. The headline screamed from every newsstand in London. Pritchard CEO's marriage exposed as sham. Gold digger intern signed contract for cash. Juniper stared at the newspaper in the corner shop, her morning coffee forgotten in her trembling hand. The article was brutal, every detail of their arrangement laid bare. The contract, the timeline, her family's financial struggles. Even quotes from anonymous sources close to the situation, painting her as a calculating opportunist. Her face was plastered across the front page, captured in an unflattering moment, mouth open mid-sentence. Beside it, Graham looked cold and distant, a photo clearly chosen to make him appear foolish for being deceived. Her phone exploded with notifications, messages from colleagues, missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize, and silence from the one person she needed to hear from most. Graham hadn't called. She found him at the estate, locked in his study with Marcus and a team of lawyers. When she pushed through the door, conversation stopped. Graham looked up, his face unreadable. "Junie, is it true? Did you see the article?" "I've seen it." His voice was careful, controlled. "We're developing a response strategy." "A strategy?" She moved toward him, desperate for reassurance. "Graham, they're calling me a gold digger. They're saying our entire relationship is fake. Tell them they're wrong. Tell the world what we have is real." The silence that followed carved a hole in her chest. Graham looked away, his jaw tightened, that familiar tension that meant he was struggling with something difficult. But he didn't speak, didn't move, didn't defend her. "Graham, it's complicated." Marcus stepped forward, his expression sympathetic but professional. "The board is in emergency session. Investors are panicking. We need to manage this carefully." "I don't care about the board," Juniper's voice cracked. "I care about him, about us, about the truth." She turned back to Graham, searching his face for the man who'd held her last night, who'd whispered words of love against her skin. "Say something," she pleaded. "Anything. I need time to think." His voice was strained. "This affects everything. The company, the investors, my father. I can't just what? Acknowledge that you love me? Admit that somewhere along the way this stopped being business?" Tears streamed down her face. "Last night meant nothing to you?" "Last night meant everything." Finally, emotion broke through his mask. Pain, confusion, fear. "But I don't know what to do here, Uni. If I confirm the contract existed, I look like a fool. If I deny it, I'm lying. Either way, you're not defending me." The words hung between them like a death sentence. Juniper stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. "I see. Well, at least now I know where I stand." "Uni, wait." But she was already gone, fleeing through the corridors of the house that had almost felt like home. She found Antonio in the greenhouse, tending to orchids with gentle hands. The elderly gardener took one look at her tear-stained face and set down his watering can. "Come," he said softly. "Sit with me." They sat among the flowers while Juniper poured out her heartbreak. Antonio listened without judgment, his weathered face creased with compassion. "He loves you," Antonio said when she finished. "That much is clear to anyone with eyes." "Then why didn't he defend me?" "Fear." Antonio's voice was gentle. "Mr. Graham has been hurt deeply. When we've been wounded, our first instinct is to protect ourselves, even from those we love, especially from those we love. That doesn't make it right." "No, it doesn't." He placed a gnarled hand over hers. "But it makes it human. The question is whether you can give him time to find his courage. Before Juniper could respond, her phone rang. An unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Did you enjoy the morning headlines?" Charlotte's voice slithered through the speaker like poison. "You." Juniper's grip tightened on the phone. "You did this. I warned you, didn't I? Convince your husband to drop his investigation or I'd burn everything down." Charlotte laughed, cold and cruel. "You should have listened. How could you? Your own family—" "You stopped being my family long ago, you and Mother and that sniveling child. Your anchors dragging me down into mediocrity." Charlotte's voice hardened. "Graham's lawyers froze my accounts this morning. His people are preparing criminal charges, but it doesn't matter. I've already destroyed you both. You're wrong." Juniper found strength she didn't know she possessed. "You might have exposed our arrangement, but you can't destroy what Graham and I have built. What we feel is real, and unlike you, we have people who love us." "How touching. Enjoy your delusions while they last." The line went dead. Juniper sat motionless, processing what she'd learned. Charlotte, her own sister, had orchestrated this. Revenge for being caught, for being exposed, for facing consequences for once in her pampered life. She needed to tell Graham. She found him standing alone on the terrace, staring at the gardens with haunted eyes. When he heard her approach, he turned, his expression raw with remorse. "I know who leaked the story," she said before he could speak. "Charlotte." She called to gloat. Graham closed his eyes. "I should have protected you. I should have stood in front of those cameras and told the world I love you. Instead, I froze." His voice broke. "I was afraid, Junie. Afraid that admitting I'd fallen for my contract wife made me weak. And now?" He crossed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. "Now I know that loving you is the strongest thing I've ever done, and I'm done being afraid." Juniper searched his eyes and found only truth. "Then prove it," she whispered. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Get me every news outlet in London. I have a statement to make." The press conference was held in the grand ballroom of Pritchard Industries headquarters. Cameras flashed like lightning as Graham stepped to the podium, his amber eyes blazing with determination. Juniper stood nearby, her heart racing, unsure what to expect. He had refused to tell her what he planned to say, insisting she simply trust him. Trust. Such a fragile, powerful word. "Thank you all for coming." Graham's voice carried through the room, commanding instant silence. "I'm aware of the stories circulating about my marriage. I'm here to address them directly." Reporters leaned forward, hungry for scandal. Juniper clasped her hands to stop their trembling. "Yes, my marriage to Juniper Halstead began as a business arrangement." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras clicked frantically. "I was pressured by circumstances to find stability quickly, and I proposed a contract marriage. Cold, calculated, practical." He paused, his gaze finding Juniper across the room. What I didn't anticipate was falling completely, irrevocably in love with her. The room fell silent. "Juniper Halstead is the most remarkable woman I've ever known. She entered a situation that could have corrupted anyone and maintained her integrity, her kindness, her grace. She didn't want my money or my status. She wanted to save her mother's life, and somewhere along the way she saved mine too." His voice grew rough with emotion. "I spent years building walls, convincing myself that vulnerability was weakness, that love was a liability. Juniper demolished every defense I had, not through manipulation but through genuine compassion. She saw the man behind the title and chose to stay anyway." He turned fully toward her now, speaking as if they were the only two people in the room. "I should have defended you immediately. I should have stood before these cameras the moment the story broke and declared what we have. Instead, I let fear paralyze me. I let you face the wolves alone." His jaw tightened. "That will never happen again." Graham faced the press once more, his posture radiating authority. "The source of these leaks is Charlotte Halstead, my former executive secretary and Juniper's estranged sister. She is currently under investigation for embezzlement from this company. Her actions were motivated by revenge, nothing more." Murmurs swept through the crowd. Reporters scribbled furiously. "Charlotte will face the full consequences of her crimes, both the financial theft and her malicious attack on my wife's reputation. Our legal team is pursuing all available charges." He stepped back from the podium, his eyes never leaving Juniper's face. "To my wife, I love you. I choose you. Today, tomorrow, and every day after. Whatever began as contract has become the most genuine thing in my life, and I will spend the rest of my days proving I deserve you." The room erupted in questions, but Graham was already walking toward Juniper. He cupped her face in his hands, wiping away the tears streaming down her cheeks. "Did you mean it?" she whispered. "Every word? Every syllable?" He pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm sorry it took me so long to find my courage. You found it when it mattered." He kissed her then in front of flashing cameras and shouting reporters, pouring every ounce of love into the gesture. The photos would make front pages across the country, not as scandal but as vindication. In the days that followed, the tide turned. Public opinion shifted dramatically. Juniper received messages of support from strangers touched by their story. The business world, initially skeptical, rallied behind Graham's honesty. His father, Edward, surprised everyone by making his own statement, praising Juniper's character and welcoming her officially into the family. Charlotte's downfall was swift and complete. The evidence against her was overwhelming. Years of careful theft documented in meticulous detail. She was terminated immediately, escorted from the building by security. Criminal proceedings followed within weeks. Facing insurmountable evidence, she accepted a plea deal that included full restitution and community service. Juniper felt no satisfaction in her sister's disgrace, only sadness for what might have been and relief that it was over. "Do you pity her?" Graham asked one evening, finding Juniper staring at the rain. "I pity who she could have been." Juniper leaned into his embrace. "We had the same beginning, Charlotte and I. Same parents, same struggles. Somewhere along the way, she chose bitterness over love. I can't hate her for that. I can only be grateful I chose differently." Graham tightened his arms around her. "You chose beautifully." As autumn deepened into winter, their love continued to bloom. Graham's walls crumbled entirely, revealing a man capable of profound tenderness. He laughed more, worried less. Spent weekends teaching Lily to ride horses at the estate, charming Juniper's mother with flowers and thoughtful conversations. "He's wonderful," her mother said during a visit, watching Graham chase Lily through the gardens. "I knew from the moment I met him." "You were unconscious when you met him," Juniper reminded her with a smile. "A mother knows." She squeezed Juniper's hand. "He looks at you the way your father used to look at me, before he lost his way." "Graham won't lose his way." "No," her mother agreed. "He won't, because he has you to guide him home." Christmas at the estate was magical. Snow blanketed the grounds, transforming the gardens into a winter wonderland. Lily built snowmen with Antonio, while Graham and Juniper decorated a towering tree in the main hall. "I never had Christmas like this growing up," Graham admitted, hanging an ornament. "My mother tried, but after she passed, my father threw himself into work. Holidays were just obligations. And now," he pulled her close, ornament forgotten. "Now they're everything I ever wanted. Because you're here." She kissed him softly, tasting champagne and promise. "Merry Christmas, husband." "Merry Christmas, wife." Outside, snow continued to fall, wrapping the estate in peaceful white. Inside, love burned bright enough to light any darkness. The year of their contract was nearly over, but their real marriage was just beginning. Spring arrived at the estate like a promise kept. Cherry blossoms rained pink petals across the gardens where Antonio had worked his magic. The lake shimmered beneath a perfect blue sky, its surface scattered with floating lanterns that would glow like earthbound stars come evening. Today, Graham and Juniper would renew their vows. Not in a sterile registry office this time, not as strangers bound by contract and desperation, but as two people who had found their way through darkness into light, choosing each other with full hearts and open eyes. Juniper stood before the mirror in her dressing room, smoothing the delicate lace of her gown. It was simple and elegant, ivory silk that flowed like water, with a fitted bodice embroidered with tiny seed pearls. Nothing like the charity shop dress she'd worn to that first ceremony. "You look like an angel," her mother said from the doorway, tears glistening in her eyes. She had recovered beautifully, stronger now than she'd been in years, her cheeks rosy with health and happiness. "Don't cry, Mum, you'll make me cry. Happy tears only." Her mother crossed the room, taking Juniper's hands. I prayed for this, you know. When I was lying in that hospital bed, not knowing if I'd survive, I prayed my daughters would find love. One of us did. Charlotte made her choices. Sadness flickered across her mother's face, but acceptance had replaced the grief. I still hope she'll find redemption someday. But today is about you, my darling girl. About the beautiful life you've built. Lily burst through the door dressed in her flower girl dress, a basket of rose petals clutched in her small hands. Junie, he's waiting. Mr. Graham looks so handsome in his suit, and Antonio said the flowers are perfect, and everyone is crying already even though nothing has happened yet. Juniper laughed, the nervous tension dissolving into pure joy. Then we shouldn't keep him waiting. The ceremony took place at the lake's edge, where a white canopy billowed gently in the breeze. Rows of chairs held their most beloved guests, Marcus and his wife, Antonio with tears streaming unabashedly down his weathered face, Edward Pritchard looking prouder than Juniper had ever seen him. But she saw only Graham. He stood beneath the canopy in a navy suit that matched his midnight hair, his amber eyes shining as she walked toward him on her mother's arm. When their gazes met, his composure cracked. She saw his breath catch, his lips part, his entire being lean toward her like a flower seeking sun. "You're breathtaking," he whispered as she reached him. "So are you." The officiant spoke of love and commitment, of journeys that transform us, of two souls becoming one. Graham held her hands throughout, his thumbs tracing circles on her palms, that familiar gesture that had become their secret language. When time came for vows, Graham spoke first. "1 year ago, I proposed a contract, terms and conditions, an end date." His voice was rough with emotion. "I thought I was protecting myself from ever being hurt again. Instead, I was building a prison. You freed me, Uni. You showed me that love isn't weakness. It's the only strength that truly matters." He lifted her hand to his lips. "I vow to love you without reservation, to trust you completely, to stand beside you through every storm and celebrate every sunrise. Whatever comes, we face it together, always." Juniper's vision blurred with happy tears. "Graham, I came to you broken and desperate. I expected coldness and found warmth buried beneath armor. I expected obligation and discovered passion." She squeezed his hands. "You didn't just save my mother's life. You gave me a life worth living. A home, a family, a love I never dared dream possible." She reached up to touch his face. "I vow to be your partner in all things, to remind you of your goodness when you forget, to love you fiercely and faithfully through whatever life brings. You are my home, Graham Pritchard, today and forever." The officiant pronounced them married, truly married this time, in spirit as well as law. Graham kissed her with tender intensity, his hands cradling her face like she was precious beyond measure. Applause erupted. Lily threw handfuls of petals into the air. Somewhere, Antonio was openly sobbing. The reception lasted until stars emerged to witness their happiness. They danced beneath the glowing lanterns, Graham holding Juniper close, swaying to music that seemed to play for them alone. "I have something to tell you," Juniper whispered against his shoulder. "Hmm?" He was nuzzling her hair, drunk on champagne and joy. "I was going to wait, but I can't keep secrets from you anymore." She pulled back slightly, meeting his curious gaze. "I saw the doctor yesterday. I wanted to be certain before I said anything." His brow furrowed. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is perfect." She took his hand and pressed it against her belly. "We're going to have a baby." Graham froze. His amber eyes widened, then glistened with sudden tears. "A baby?" His voice cracked on the word. "About 7 weeks along. I suspected, but I wanted confirmation before." She never finished the sentence. Graham swept her into his arms, spinning her carefully while laughing and crying simultaneously. "A baby," he repeated, setting her down to kiss her thoroughly. "Our baby. Are you happy?" "Happy." He cupped her face, his eyes blazing with fierce joy. "I'm terrified and ecstatic and overwhelmed and grateful beyond anything I've ever felt. You've given me everything, Uni. Everything." She leaned into his embrace, feeling his heart pound against her cheek. "Forever, my love," he whispered, pressing his lips to her hair. "Forever," she promised. Above them, stars winked their approval. Around them, loved ones celebrated. And within her, New life stirred, the beginning of their next chapter. What had started as a contract had become the greatest love story either could have imagined. Leave your comment and share this story with someone special. It truly helps us keep bringing new stories to you. And if you want to follow every chapter of this emotional journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Your support makes all the difference.